morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. It looks like Judd Apatow is set to expand his comedy empire once more, as it was announced yesterday that he signed Key and Peele from Comedy Central to write and star in a film that he will produce. And Apatow says this is a film that America desperately needs. Well, I don't know about America, but I think Apatow desperately needs it because it will add some much-needed diversity to his resume. Now, for those of you not familiar with Key and Peele, they are a pair of African-American comedians that have a somewhat successful show on Comedy Central. I don't think they're particularly well known to mainstream audiences, but the show has lasted several seasons. So this is a huge opportunity for them to move up to feature films with a really talented and powerful comedy producer. So that's great. And also, I think this is really good for Apatow because he does mostly the same kind of comedy. He works with the same white bread guys. He's got Paul Rudd, Will Ferrell, and his own family. That's basically the only people he works with consistently. And so I'm glad to see him reaching out. And also, he's making race jokes in Anchorman 2, and those jokes seem to be landing. They seem to be getting a lot of laughs. I think they come across well. But at the same time, it's still a bunch of white guys making race jokes. So it's great to see him, bringing in diverse talent. We're having the same argument about Saturday Night Live very publicly. They do not have a diverse cast. But I think they have some of their strongest humor. If you watch the Kerry Washington episode, some of their strongest and boldest humor, Take No Prisoners, was when she was the guest star, and they made a lot of really good race jokes and sketches. I mean, two of them were the "What Does the Fox Say" take on that song with a girlfriend, which was really good, and then also the sketch about what would it take for black voters not to support Obama. That's always a really smart and clever sketch, really well done. So I think that's great for putting more of a spotlight on black comedy. Now, at the other hand, I think that it's important though that we don't keep these things separate. There can't be an all-black episode of Saturday Night Live where that's the only thing they focus on, and then we go back to the other thing. I think in order for there to be growth here, while African-American films have really been solidified as a genre, they are definitely successful. There's no longer a question of whether or not they can do well and they can sustain themselves. This is a genre that's here to stay. But there needs to be more crossover. Not only, I really would love it if more, white audiences would go and check out these African-American films, because when you think about it, tons of people of different races go to see primarily white films, and they do quite well at the box office, yet, disappointingly, when you reverse the situation, white audiences just aren't as open-minded, which is, really unfortunate, because they're missing some very good movies. But I also want to see black comedians coming into mainstream films on a big level. I'm very excited for Grudge Match that Kevin Hart is there opposite Sylvester Stallone, Robert De Niro, and Alan Arkin. I think that's very promising. Last night, even on Modern Family, there was an actor playing against, I forget he's from, I forgot his name. He's from Married with Children. And they had a guest actor who was playing like a buddy cop with him at a state fair. It was something they were doing for charity. And they had some great routines, and there was nothing made of the actor's race. It was just great comedic situation. So I think that's really important that, and I hope that Judd Apatow doesn't create like a side business of doing African-American comedies. I think that it's important that he mix it up and he bring those talented people, bring Key and Peele into his mainstream films, bring them into the films he's making with Will Ferrell and Paul Rudd. And I think that's really an important next step. And also, we need Maya Rudolph just got herself a variety show that's going to be, I think, going forward with Lorne Michaels producing. But there's like a real lack of non-white female comedians. So there's Wanda Sykes, basically, I guess. Okay. The other thing I want to point out, though, about this deal is you have to look through, read between the lines. And both, who is it? Oh yes, Keegan-Michael Key of Key and Peele is represented by UTA, United Talent Agency, which also happens to be the talent agency of Judd Apatow. So if you're wondering why he picked Key and Peele to expand his repertoire, it's probably because their agents dreamed it up together and took it to Apatow and said, we represent this guy, we want to see him take it to the next level. We would like it if you would be that person to do that because let's keep it in the family. It's called agency packaging. They package projects. In the old days, the studio would put together projects, but now very often agencies will come to studios or television companies and they will say, here, we've put this whole thing together with our clientele. Do you want the package? So it's a very interesting way of doing business. So tough luck to the very talented black comedians who aren't repped by UTA. All right, so that's the first story of the day. There's always strings. Okay, so the second story of the day is that The Princess Bride is coming to a stage near you because Disney, which has created quite the theatrical empire, turning their animated films into Broadway huge mega productions, is now apparently looking to other films to do that, to expand their their roster of musicals. The Princess Bride, interesting choice. This is a difficult situation. I don't know who really can replace, Mandy Patinkin, Carrie Elwes, Robin Wright, or Robin Wright Penn. I guess it's back to Robin Wright now. That's really a classic, wonderful film. But it has fairy tale elements, so I can see maybe wanting to bring it to the stage. However, I have a little bit of a problem with these stage adaptations because I feel it would be horrible if people were like, well, I don't need to see the movie. I could watch this musical. That's, I prefer that. I really just wish they would come up with original stories. This is a problem that I think many of us have again and again, where it's like, you know what, why don't you just hire a writer to think of something new? But I just wonder if you guys think that the Princess Bride magic can be captured on the stage, if you think that's possible. And also they have the big sword fight. I guess that could be thrilling in person. But and also they're going to have to write songs. I mean, as I recall, it's not, even though Mandy Patinkin can sing, it's not a musical from the movie. And I think that it would be interesting to see how if they can do that correctly without, schmaltzing it up, I guess. All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story is that you might have heard that 50 Shades of Grey has moved off the Guardians of the Galaxy release date. They had to blink. When did they move to? They moved to February 13th, 2015 for Valentine's Day. And at first I was like, wow, that's going to be kind of sad. Who's going to go watch porn for Valentine's Day? But then I started to think that might be brilliant because you might get a lot of guys who are like, okay, I guess I'll see this if it will get my girlfriend in the mood. Or my wife. So that could work. And also for people who don't have Valentine's Day dates, I don't know. I would think that would just make me sad if I didn't have a date for Valentine's Day and I was like, I guess I'll go watch porn. And although from what I hear, everyone's so unhappy with this casting of Christian Grey with Jamie Dornan that no one's going to go anyway. This could be the biggest flop ever. It'll be really interesting. It could be huge or it could be just a disaster. But anyway, Guardians of the Galaxy doesn't have to deal with that anymore. And I think a lot of us will be very happy. However, I actually feel it's now in more danger, because Sex Tape, the Cameron Diaz, Jason Segel comedy, has moved opposite it. Now, that is great counter-programming. It's a legitimate film, so nobody has to feel embarrassed going to see it. And you have Chris Pratt, who this is very interesting, slimmed down significantly for his role, going opposite Jason Segel, who slimmed down significantly for his role. And it still has a little bit of the, I guess, erotic element, because Sex Tape is about a couple that makes a sex tape and it accidentally, I believe, gets on the loose. And so they're like, what are we going to do? And Jason Segel, who loves to get naked, I guess apparently he lost weight to try and look better in his sex tape. So I don't know why all of a sudden he feels so self-conscious, because it's never bothered him to drop all of his clothes off before, even with his old figure. So anyway, I actually feel that it's a better counter-programming to Guardians of the Galaxy and actually more of a threat. So I'd be interested what you guys think. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Today's viewer question comes from Black Boys on Stage, and it's actually a very interesting question. And so it says, hello, Grace. And speaking of our first story today about race and everything like that, it says, hello, Grace, I have a question for you, and I'm hoping you would please answer it. I am answering it. Okay. I know people are saying you should continue to look at the past, but as a young 12-year-old historian, good for you. I believe I guess he's saying I think what it meant is people shouldn't look at the past. But anyway, this 12-year-old feels, as someone who's interested in history, I believe that it's very important, and I would like to discuss racism, sexism, and plain prejudice in cartoons, and my main focus is Walt Disney. A lot of people have focused on the racism in old Walt Disney cartoons. And so Black Boys on Stage goes on to say, I've heard all of the horrible, almost satanic things about him. I wouldn't go that far. As he wouldn't hire blacks, he was sexist, and he hated Jews. I've also noticed some of this projected into his films, particularly the Jim Crow scene from Dumbo. What do you think about these accusations? Because I believe this is a very evil thing for Disney to do. Thanks in advance. Black Boys on Ice. Oh, Black Boys on Ice. Black Boys on Ice, no racism intended. Yeah, this is a safe environment. You can ask any question you want here. I'm not going to judge any question. And I picked this question because I thought it was an interesting subject. Now, I myself am a huge Walt Disney fan. And when I was little, I read a lot of Walt Disney biographies. And I'll never forget the day that I discovered that Walt Disney probably wouldn't like me very much because I was a woman. Or a female. And so because I was watching this like World of Disney, and he was showing behind the scenes at the park, and he had one of those tour guides who was helping out as she was who he was supposed to be talking to while he gave the tour, so he had someone to interact with for the television audience at home. And he was very dismissive and kind of sexist towards her, and it was really startling. It's startling, and they always, that famous saying, never meet your heroes. It was just startling to think, wow, if I were to meet Walt Disney, who was a personal hero of mine, and to some degree still is, he would be dismissive of me and not take me seriously. But I think it's important to realize, Black Boys on Ice, that Walt Disney was very much a product of his times. Now, that doesn't excuse what he did, and a lot of people who are his contemporaries realized that these things were wrong and stood up for other people. But I don't think he hated Jews. I don't know. I can't speak for how Walt Disney felt. I know that he had a lot of prejudices, and they were shared by a number of people at the time. As you can see, he had all these practices of, being, disrespectful to women and Jewish people, and also not hiring blacks, and nobody did anything about it. Nobody at his company was like, we're going to get sued, this is a problem, or this is just morally wrong. It just was allowed to happen. And I would say the same thing goes for the way he predicted things in Song of the South and Dumbo. There are a number of very offensive scenes from early on in film when this was considered okay. And it's unfortunate. And I would think it's important to always take these things with a grain of salt and understand the context of the situation. Now, I also think it's important to realize that Walt Disney, while he created a wonderful forms of entertainment, both on the screen and also the theme parks, he wasn't a perfect individual. People rarely are, particularly very aggressive people who build empires, because it's a very difficult, trying thing to do. You have to be very difficult, and you'll notice that there are a lot of similarities between titans of industry. So I would hope that, Black Boys on Ice, as you study these things, it doesn't detract from some of the very good things that Disney has done. And also, they've done a great job recently, the company, of trying to be more diverse. I think they're slipping on that a little bit. I'm going to cover that soon in an episode, probably after Catching Fire comes out, because that's a really big thing to cover. But, there was Pocahontas, there was Mulan, there was Tiana. Steps are being taken, I think, to bring more diversity. And I think that's really important. And hopefully they'll do that in their Marvel movies as well. So that's my answer. I think we shouldn't ignore what happened. We shouldn't try to whitewash and make Disney look like a saint. But I think at the same time, I think we just have to separate. And I know some people will be like, well, what about Arnold Schwarzenegger, Grace? Everyone loves to bring that up. I think what Arnold Schwarzenegger did was morally despicable to his own family, and I think it crossed a line. And I think that if what Disney did, while really regrettable and unfortunate, was what everybody was doing then. So I think it's different. It's like if Disney did that today, if Disney was alive and doing these things today, that would be morally reprehensible and unforgivable. So that's my answer. This is a very gray area, and I think at the end of the day, everyone has to decide for themselves where they stand on these issues. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. You can write down below what you think of today's 3 stories and the viewer question, and anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.